A warning over the rise in obesity across the world. The UN's goal is to stop the weight gain in its tracks by 2025. But experts say they're failing. As many as 1 in 6 adults could be obese by then, with the world's health and economy bearing the brunt. This is Inside Story. Hello there, welcome to the programme. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Well, it's a big problem and it's getting bigger. Despite efforts, worldwide obesity is rising. Researchers say by 2025, more than 2 billion people will be overweight or obese. And the consequences are clear. Already, obesity-related diseases are killing around 3 million people every year. Well, this is what obesity rates look like around the world. The Cook Islands tops the list. Almost half the population is obese. In fact, several Pacific Island nations have high obesity rates of often more than 40%. The United States has the highest obesity rate in the developed world, almost 1/3 of its population. And it's a big issue in the Gulf as well. Kuwait, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates all have obesity rates between 33 and 40%. But it's not just a problem for the rich. These developing countries saw a rapid rise in obesity rates between 2010 and last year. Myanmar's increase was almost 30%, with Uganda, Cambodia and Laos not far behind. So, can the march of obesity be stopped and what needs to change? Let's bring in our guests. Here with me in the studio is Dr. Mohamed Verji, Director of Primary Care at Weill Cornell Medical College in Qatar. In London, Tam Fry, spokesman for the UK's National Obesity Forum. And in New Delhi, joining us via Skype, Shikha Sharma, a dietitian and founder of NutriHealth, working on weight management and lifestyle disorders. Welcome to all my guests to the programme today. Tam, let me start with you, because it is not an understatement to call this an epidemic, is it? The levels of global obesity have gone up from 11.5% in 2010 to 13% in 2014. I mean, that's 670 million people.
Yeah, we've had this epidemic now for years. A lot of people have been saying we have a time bomb about to go off. Well, the time bomb went off at least 15 years ago, and at the moment we're suffering all the detritus as a result of that. And in my view, it's just going to go and continue until world governments, all governments in the world, do something really constructive about the prime cause, which is the food industry, in my view.
And when you talk about the detritus of obesity, you're talking about the steep rise in diseases like diabetes, like heart problems.
Yeah, and in a sense, they're even more costly than obesity, simple obesity by itself. And you can add to diabetes and heart disease, you can add cancers, liver diseases. All kinds of things are now starting to be shown by literature as stemming from obesity.
Mohamed, Qatar, of course, has the dubious honour of being one of the fattest countries in the world. But when we think of obesity, there are certain things we think of immediately, like diabetes and heart-related problems. But as Tam there was suggesting, it goes a lot deeper than that.
Oh, absolutely. It's actually, even Tam has been very modest about his description, but not only is it a contributor towards a very debilitating heart disease when it gets to be extreme, but we're talking about fertility problems here. We're talking about the very youth, if you like, of the future nation. We're talking about problems with mental health as well. We know that people who have diabetes, for instance, are much more likely to suffer from dementia. There's evidence-based proof of that right now. And in fact, things even simpler, they're perhaps more physical, where you are obese, you may suffer from certain conditions like sleep apnea, where basically you can't breathe normally. And that actually contributes not only to heart disease again, but to weight gain and problems ensuing thereafter.
It's astonishing when you put it like that there doesn't seem to be more panic over the sheer levels of obesity in the world.
I think really this is a problem that we really have to address in a different way. We have to look at a new way. There is no absolute justification for frightening people. People live, and they live the way they do because they want to, because they enjoy themselves. They like to go out, they like to do things. And there's no law you can mandate, so you can't eat this and can't do that. But if they were to be aware of the issues that arise from it in a way where it's meaningful, then in fact that might actually have more weight in looking after themselves. Because I can tell you that in 30 years since I started in practice, the number of diabetics I had in my hand 30 years ago was 10, less than 10 out of a practice size of 2,000. My last practice was about 2,200, and a quarter, 428 were actually diabetic. That is incredible.
That is an incredible increase. Shika, obesity seems to be particularly escalating in developing countries. India has a big problem, despite the fact that tens of millions of its people live in poverty. Why is that?
See, India actually has a mix of different populations. No? So you have people who who are living in the poverty line, and some of them below the poverty line. But you have a very rapidly evolving and developing India where you have the Mercedes, Audis, the BMWs being sold. So India is a mix of developing, the developed, and the underdeveloped countries. So it's a mix of all three. And it is in the developing sector and that we are seeing the obesity escalate. And particularly, we are seeing it in the big cities and the tier 2 cities also. And part of it is because the availability of a lot of fast foods, the availability of ready-to-eat foods, that's very typical. Convenience. The convenience drives nations, and whatever we might do, it all boils down to human nature.
So you're saying it's because of the availability of fast foods and sugary drinks?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is human nature, basic human nature, which is getting tougher and tougher because it's so available.
OK, well, let's just take a look at one of the problems of sugary drinks. This is a bog standard, normal, soft drink, fizzy drink that lots and lots of kids drink. This is the sugar that's included in this one little can. This is 39 grams of sugar. Let me pour it out so you can see just how much of it there is. More than 9 teaspoons full of sugar in one can. Imagine how much sugar you could get through if you drank 2 or 3 of these cans a day. Tam, the sugary drinks, convenience foods, junk foods, all of these contributing to the rise in obesity, particularly among children. Child obesity is a huge problem.
Well, you're just pouring out a glass of that liquid, and in fact it's double and sometimes treble the amount of sugar which we should be consuming on a daily basis as a percentage of our energy. And if I will try and be as modest as possible for your doctor sitting with you, but I will actually not want to scare people, but I want to make sure that they know what the consequences are. There was a lecture in Glasgow the other day where one of the doctors from the Royal Colleges here said that we had to scare people. I think that's a bit drastic. But when you're talking about diabetes, it's not just a condition. You can lose limbs. You can go blind as a result of that. And if people are told that might be a consequence, I think that they will sit up and say, not for me.
Do you know what's really frightening, Tam? I was reading the other day that the British chef Jamie Oliver travelled to US cities as part of his healthy eating campaign. He found children there didn't know what a tomato was, didn't know what a cauliflower was. Are we not educating our children to eat properly?
Well, that is absolutely the case. And one of the ways in which we're trying to combat it over here is to totally change the way that we look at obesity. Your doctor colleague there has said that we've got to take a different approach. And the approach which we are pushing here is to actually go right back to square one, where the origins of obesity might begin. And that is at school, because it's at school, particularly with women at school, who are putting on so much weight that they go into pregnancy overweight and obese, and that starts the whole vicious cycle. And if you start badly, it's a devil of a job to try and bring the child back down to size. So what we're saying is that you have to teach children about cooking, about food, about handling it, and then you need to look after them whilst in the womb. We need to worry much more about our mothers-to-be and during pregnancy, and then you have to build up a proper food culture from the word go. And then you cross your fingers and you hope that they take in those messages and will remain within a healthy weight for the rest of their childhood.
I can see Shika nodding her head to that. Do you agree, Shika, that this kind of education to try and stop obesity in its tracks should start with children in school?
Absolutely. So, mostly in schools, we are very concerned about that they should know their reading and writing and mathematics and geography. But we are not concerned about that the human beings should understand about their bodies, about what nourishes and what actually takes away nourishment. And therefore, I would even recommend going to the next level is, healthy eating and looking after your body should be part of the curriculum.
Mohamed, let me come to you. It seems incredible that we spend so much on health-related issues to do with obesity and all the conditions that come with that, and we don't spend as much money on trying to prevent those conditions.
Well, I think the word prevent is absolutely key here, because we really should be looking at ways to stop it happening in the very first place. I agree with everything that Tam said and Shekhar endorsed as well. But I think the way around it is not simply to put a lot of figures or a lot of measures in people's ways and say, weigh it out and look for yourself. We've decided this is actually good for you and this is not good for you, etc. And it probably doesn't have a very warming effect when someone's favourite food is at a fast food restaurant. They're not going to want to give it up, not that easily.
But when we come to things like cigarettes, there's a great big warning on cigarette packets. This can cause lung cancer. Why don't we have great big warnings on junk food saying this can make you really ill?
Well, I'm not defending junk foods at all, but I don't think it's junk food's fault. I think it's our fault. And I use the analogy to say it's really like diabetes is like creeping towards the edge of a cliff. You want to see what's over, but you don't dare stand up because you're going to fall over. So you creep on your all fours to the edge, and then diabetes, when it happens, is like going over the edge and there's no return. Would you want to do that? Would anyone want to do that? Of course you wouldn't. And it's that way people say, I realise, you mean it's that serious? Yes, it is that serious, absolutely.
Well, let's have a look at the financial impact of obesity. It's a big impact. It's nearly as big as smoking, according to one assessment. The McKinsey Global Institute says the cost of obesity around the world is $2 trillion a year. That's around 2.8% of global economic output, or the gross domestic product. In developed economies, obese and overweight patients account for 15% of healthcare costs. Tam, the UK spends £6 billion a year on medical costs related to obesity and overweight conditions, yet less than £638 million on obesity prevention programmes. I mean, that's less than 1% of the social cost. Why aren't there more resources dedicated to fighting the flab?
I think it's because everybody wants to see people being brought down to size, which is a real problem, and you can understand if you're very overweight, you feel that you need the treatment, whether it's simple weight loss treatment or it's bariatric surgery. That is imperative. And so everybody has had their attention diverted, if you will, from the real problem, which is, as your doctor is saying, prevention. Now we've got to put much more money into prevention, because if we can do that, every penny that you spend on prevention saves 8 pennies further down the line. And therefore, it's a no-brainer. And we've got to really reorganize the way in which society looks at obesity and the way that it's dealing with it, to go back, if you will, to those crucial 1,000 days in a child's life where the whole thing starts to formulate. That is preconception through pregnancy and through those early years. We have 25% of our children who are either overweight or obese by the time they go to primary school. That is an absolute disgrace. So if you start at school, you've already missed 1/4 of your population. You have to go back further in time and really do something to stop children, or help to stop children, getting fat in the first place.
OK, Shika, what do you think? What does it take to stop the rise in obesity? Should there be more coordination between governments and, for example, food and drink manufacturers?
Absolutely. What is important is that obesity cannot be stopped so easily just by a few things. So, the government has to incentivize health foods. It has to incentivize the manufacturers of health foods. And on the other side, it has to put some kind of a little higher taxation on foods which are inherently unhealthy, like, for example, margarine. It's inherently unhealthy, and it has no business going into cookies, which eventually kids eat much more than adults. So similarly, I think somewhere economic policy, because eventually economics is a very strong way of driving change in society. So
Okay, but what
economic
about the
policies-
argument? What about the argument? You know, why should the government have to show you that it's bad to eat margarine? Why aren't we capable of making that decision for ourselves?
As a population, what happens is when you go out into the market and you buy a pack of cookies, you somewhere cannot read all the labels. You cannot really decipher for yourself, and you may have to take it to a professional. Now,
But Shika, we all know that eating a packet of cookies is not going to be good for you.
Absolutely. But if you really see the kind of foods which are available in schools and around schools, if you do a recce of all the school cafeterias, what are they serving? They're serving most of the foods which are inherently termed as kids' foods, and they're high in sugar, they're high in fat and trans fats, and extremely low in fiber. So somewhere I think it is also that a little bit of regulation kind of kickstarts the process.
Do you agree with that, Tam, that when it comes to things like school canteens, there should be more oversight of what children are actually putting into their bodies?
Absolutely, and we've had many reports in the United Kingdom telling the government that not only is the food in schools not up to scratch, but the food in hospitals is disastrous. And basically every outlet which has a governmental or a public aspect to it, there should be very strict regulation on what is served inside it. I've been doing a lot of work with the fact that we have a lot of companies buying space in hospitals to sell junk food. So you go into the hospital and you get your burger, but it is absolutely catastrophic for the cardiologists who go in the same entrance and they say to themselves, fine, they're having a burger today, they'll be my patient tomorrow. We've got to clean up everything to do with food. And if you will, we've got to clean up the food industry in the first place. Now, there's a great move in the United Kingdom to get the Food Standards Agency here to say, we recognize that people need a little sugar, we need a little fat, we need a little salt. But you will not produce now, as a manufacturer, foodstuffs which are above a certain level. And the Food Standards Agency can set that level, and industry must be told, you set that level, don't exceed it. If you succeed,
So you're right. Are you actually talking about a ban on certain types of high sugar, high fat foods?
No, I'm not talking about bans at all. Bans would be a bad idea. But what we're striving to do is to make sure that every piece of food which is produced is as healthy as it can be. And that is not the situation at the moment.
What do you think about that, Mohamed? Because does the government need to take a hand on this? I mean, you were saying that, you don't blame the junk food industry, but should the government be coming in and saying, look, we need to make food better?
Well, I certainly think the government of Qatar is doing everything possible. It made tremendous inroads into addressing this. We know that obesity by the WHO is about 13% of the world. Qatar's own figure is about 33%. That's unacceptable. And they know they've got to address it. So what they have certainly tried to inspire is activity, sports, and people don't realize that they may actually put on weight if they are active. But the weight they put on is muscle. Muscle actually uses calories faster. And in fact, they actually will be not only fitter, but they'll be better and they'll be healthier, even though they actually perhaps do put on it. So it's not just a simple fact of actually gaining weight as such, it's what you gain weight with.
Well, what about Shika's idea of incentivising health food manufacturers and maybe putting a tax on, say, sugary drinks, something like that, which might encourage people to make different choices?
This is actually, I think, a little bit altruistic, in my opinion, because the food industry itself is enormous, it's gigantic. We are small people fighting a huge, huge, complex commercial industry around the world, in every aspect, in every country. We're not going to make a scratch, really, by just creating nice objectives.
Isn't that the problem, that we've gone away from traditional foodstuffs and into this sort of urban food industry? I mean, it's notable that all the highest obesity rates are in urban areas.
That's quite right. But in fact, if you look at the effort that's been made to try and get people on their feet, to get them active, to get them to be in part of communities, to be aware and conscious of not just looking at calories, but looking at their general health. as well as actually trying to educate them. We have diabetic educational counsellors, for instance, here. We have removed all the tempting treats from schools. And so there's a certain limit to how much you can micromanage anybody at any stage.
Well, I know that Qatar has introduced the National Sports Day to get its people moving. I mean, are initiatives like that good? Have you seen an improvement?
Absolutely. Oh, yes, absolutely. No, the interest has been tremendous, and people sometimes discovered it as if it's sort of, where did that come from? And they love it. And I know the weather sometimes is a bit inclement and rather hot, and you may have to take a vehicle, but there's no reason why you can't go inside. There are lots of indoor places to play sports, etc. It's a community aspect, you can share things, and in a funny way, you can keep an eye on each other too. Say, no, you can't eat that,
Tam, let me come to you. If this rate of increasing obesity doesn't level out, what is going to be the global impact?
Oh, the global impact is going to just be impossible. I mean, you're going to have a workforce which is unfit to work. Your world economy is going to slump as a result of that. I mean, we're talking maybe 10 to 15 years from now, but it's now that you've got to act to try and prevent that happening. Now, I'd like to come back, speaking as I am from one of the wettest countries in the world. We haven't got the sun that you've got or is in India, but now there is a move to have all children in this country take 1.5 hours of exercise within the school system. And there's a little primary school in a town in Scotland that is getting its children to run 1 mile every morning when they get to school. And that, they have shown, not only helps the activity level of the child, but actually is improving their concentration and their willingness to learn once they get down to their lessons.
You see, the problem is, isn't it, Tam, that so on the one hand we're trying to increase activity, but on the other, it's basically the world today seems to be encouraging a sedentary lifestyle with everyone's smartphones and apps and computer games and TV and what have you. So there seems to be a battle going on for how people get to spend their spare time.
Yeah, there will be a huge battle, and it won't be easily overcome. But if you, for instance, when you grow up, you're taught to brush your teeth. And if something becomes as natural as brushing your teeth, and you can build in a 1/2 hour of activity every day as part of your school life, then not everybody, but a great percentage of people, in my view, will start to understand that they feel better as a result of it, and their quality of life improves. And then they will say, hey, this is rather a good thing, let's continue with this.
Mohamed, I suppose the million-dollar question is, can the increasing obesity levels be stopped?
I think they can, and I think it's a human cost, and I think it's a human reflection. When you have someone who is grossly obese, or just obese, and goes on to develop one of the multiple organ diseases, particularly diabetes, and they end up having renal failure, constantly having to go to hospital and having hemodialysis. They may have a stroke, they may have heart attacks, they may actually lose a limb, as Tam mentioned earlier. And probably the most emotive there, Shirley, is in fact going blind. Because diabetes has a very high fallout for going blind. And if you bleed in the eye, you are blind. Imagine being 35 or 40, being part of life, enjoying life, having your family in front of you, and having diabetes which is uncontrolled because you're overweight, and going blind for life. You'll never see again. That's a human cost. That's a human cost. We must do everything we can to make sure people are aware that if you don't take responsibility for your health, you may well end up in that complication. Not just a simple heart attack, go to hospital, have drugs, and come back home again. It's really an end point. And I think that's as a sense to know that you might end up losing something vital is grim.
Mohamed, thank you very much indeed for that. Dr. Mohamed Verji there. And thank you to my other two guests, Tam Fry and Shika Sharma. And thank you for watching. You can leave your comments on the programme page of our website, aljazeera.com. You can post your views on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or you can tweet us at AJ Inside Story. Thanks for watching from me and all the team here. Bye for now.